Hi everyone, my name is Amy Thomas. Everyone in this school more than likely has a family member or a friend who has been an addict or is an addict now. You yourself may have been an addict. My thesis statement is that a person who takes a drug primarily has a choice. A person who takes a drug knows the risk they are taking, the consequences they are facing, and is ultimately choosing to become chronically diseased. Today I will discuss several topics, including what happens when you take a drug, what it does to the brain, and also I will discuss the disease process, the diagnosis, and treatment options. Now, some people are predispositioned, especially people who grew up an alcoholic parent, and some people are predispositioned to actually become an addict themselves. They have emotional problems, they have addiction problems themselves because of the situations as a child. And sometimes they are also depressed, and sometimes they also have factors in their life that make them feel down and not wanted that lead them susceptible to these vices. Now, sometimes it only takes one time to get high for a person to be an addict. Other times it takes many times. However, after the first time, the brain remembers that first high and it releases a large amount of dopamine. And when that happens, your brain takes over the control of wanting that drug. As you can see from my visual, after you have been taking the drug, you have what's called preoccupation anticipation. And what this is where your brain actually sends the cravings to you to go seek out that drug. The brain remembers that large amount of dopamine that was released, and the memory centers, the learning centers, and the judgment centers in your brain are now rewired so that you are no longer in control of them. The brain remembers that high, and your judgment to not take that drug is now altered because the brain is going to push you to have the cravings to go get that drug, to get that dopamine release that the brain is looking for. Now what happens after you've been taking the drug for quite a while is going to take more of that drug for you to get that same effect of that high, because your brain is always going to be seeking that very first high that it will never get again. And what happens, that's called binge intoxication. It now takes more of that drug to seek an effect from that drug for your brain. So that dopamine release does not happen as easily unless you take more of that drug. Now, eventually, you will want to stop taking drugs. And what happens when you try to stop, you have what's called a negative withdrawal effect. And what happens with the body is it goes into withdrawal. You have dry heaves, you have the shakes, you have abdominal pains, you vomit, you're nauseous, you feel chronically ill. And the brain does not like that. The brain is still trying to push you to have those cravings and is making your body sick so that you will go and take that drug again. And a lot of times this is where people relapse, and because they don't want to feel that sickness anymore, they continue the cycle and go back to the preoccupation anticipation and start taking that drug again. And the cycle just continues until they are finally able to stop, or eventually they die. Now, that is what happens with the search for more, is that cycle just continues. Now, it also can start with a prescription drug. You can get hurt at work. You could have an injury from a car accident. You can have some kind of injury that leaves you in a lot of pain. And doctors are prescribing opiates and narcotics that are addicting people to these drugs. And it gets the same release of dopamine in your brain that an illegal drug gets. And actually, according to the CDC in the 2016 study, more people die of a prescription overdose than of heroin and cocaine combined. So prescription drugs are just as addictive as illegal drugs. And what happens when you stop taking those prescription drugs, when the doctor just takes that prescription away, then you start seeking alternative sources for that drug. Sometimes it means buying it underhand in back alleys or from friends, and which ultimately leads to illegal drugs also. So, is this a chronic disease? This is a chronic brain disease. Once you are addicted to drugs, you no longer have control over your judgment center. Your brain is pushing you with a dopamine release that it wants to go get that drug. And you no longer have control over your brain. Even though you know the negative effects and you know what's going to happen, you still go seek that drug. So your judgment is all not yours anymore. The brain has taken over. Now, this is not a terminal disease unless you can get help. If you can get help, this disease will not be terminal. This disease will kill you when you take that drug time and time again without stopping, without getting help. Now, because of this, will you always be an addict? Well, yes, you will always be an addict. You will always crave that drug. You now have a memory of that dopamine release that the brain wants and will always crave that drug. Now, what if you can't stop? If you can't stop taking that drug, one of two things are going to happen. Your life is going to start to diminish in quality. You're going to start committing crimes after hawking everything you own, and you no longer have anything. You're going to start stealing from people to get your drugs. Or you're going to die of that drug overdose. Now, what are the options for an addict? What can they do? Well, you have several treatment options that you can do. There are facilities that your insurance will pay for, or even your work, if you still have your job, will actually put you into rehab. Some people need to be closed in and away from everything in order to be able to go through that negative withdrawal effect and let the body rid itself completely of that drug effect. Some people, they start to seek Al-Anon meetings, they start to seek AA, they start to seek outside sources without going into facility because they really don't want anyone else to know that they have this disease, and they are trying to seek help on their own. So they start small, which is a good start. However, a lot of times people do end up needing some kind of in-house treatment facility because the body cannot get away from that preoccupation anticipation. Now, the financial costs are great. A lot of people end up losing their jobs, losing their homes, losing their family is the personal cost. And a lot of people end up living on the street and homeless and then turn to a life of crime just out of survival to get that drug again. Now, in conclusion, drug addiction comes down to a choice. You can either choose to take the drug and know the consequences and become an addict, or you can choose to not take a drug and live a disease-free life. Ultimately, it comes down to your choice. We all have vices that we seek. We have caffeine, nicotine, sex, cigarettes, sugar. We all have things that we know we should not take. That are we just not making good choices for ourselves, or are we chronically brain diseased because we are addicted to those vices? And even those are legal vices. But in the end, I think we can all agree that when you choose to take something, you have a choice. So you are choosing to have that disease.